All right, now that we have our process ready, there's one more thing that we need to do, and this is the typification. The typification is basically we can define different types of processes here, and we have a process tree. And so here I'm just going to rename this guy and call this workflow. And this is just a group. And inside this group, we're going to actually define an actual process type. And I'm going to call this, of course, work item. And I'm going to delete the sample here. And so now what we need to do, we need to tell PPM when a process is actually a work item. Again, here this doesn't seem to make a lot of sense because we only have one type of process. But imagine if we had several types of processes, you now need to give PPM rules to understand which type of process becomes which process. So here we basically just create a typification rule, and if I have others defined before, I can use a template or I can use those templates. But here we're going to start from scratch. And so here we get a calculation rule that we can define. And again, the idea is to not have to hack or code, but have the same ability as coding. And so what we need to do here, we need to return the value true if this is a work item. So this is in our case very, very simple because we have only this one type of event and stuff. So we can just take an exists operator. So this exists operator per default returns true or false. And by the way, we have the help here again, and we can take a look at exist. So you see here the return value is true, returns true if the value could be calculated for the operand, otherwise false. So we can here look for something. And so for instance, we can look for a certain attribute, and I'm just going to say ATID because I know every object is supposed to have a certain ID. And so I can basically say, if there is a work item function in your process, return true, and then make this guy a work item process. Super easy, super simple, and so now we're done. All right, so now that we have done all the configuration, all the work, we should be able to import the data and have processes and look at them. So I always like to start from scratch and initialize my database. The initialization of the database, what it does, it wipes the database, and then it takes the configuration and sets up the database with that new configuration. And once that configuration is updated, then we should be able to import the data. So the first thing I always like to do here when I work with programs is put like this log output really down here so that I can see all these programs here. And so now let's initialize the database. Okay, now that that is done, I like to take a look at my log file. And so there's a lot of stuff happening. We don't really need to read everything, but the interesting part is here that all the different configurations are being written in, and we can see this. And the important thing, however, is the very last line, which says the PPM database was successfully initialized and the analysis server was initialized successfully. So those two things, this is what we're looking for in a log file, and then we know everything is peachy. So now that we have done that, we need to import the data. And by the way, we can also create our favorite programs here. So what I'm going to do, just to make things easier in the future, I'm going to put all the programs that I usually work with in here. And so the importing is certainly one of them. The recalculation of measures is certainly one of them. And merge processes and calculate measures. So now I don't have to look into this big list of programs here. I can just run them up here. So the first thing is the initialization. The next thing is the import of the data. Now, why do we have different imports? The initialization just sets up the database. Then we have these XML imports. The XML import basically takes the event data and just shoves it into PPM, but without merging the processes together. This is so that if you have a process that is made up of different types of events, you first import all these events before you merge the processes together, because otherwise you would create merged processes all over and over again. So this is to make the import more efficient. This is why we have separate programs. In our case, it wouldn't matter because we only have one. So now here we're going to do the last step, which is the merge processes and calculate measures. So what this program does, it now takes all of these fragments, it puts them into processes, puts them into sequence, and then creates the actual process type. And then once it knows what process it is, it also will calculate all the particular metrics for that particular process. Okay, and we're done. And so now we can just here start PPM. That starts the GUI. I could have also started the GUI manually, but this way I don't have to log in. All right. And we can take a look at our processes here. And we have a whole 4 processes here, as you can see. And I can right click and take a look at these process instances. And I can right here see my processes. Beautiful. Okay. And we should also see the attributes on the processes. Not much going on up here. Most of the attributes will actually happen on the function level. Yeah, so that's it. We have successfully extracted the data, mapped the processes together, and imported the data.